All right. So we are here at my favorite session of the day because I'm with my favorite customers. So I want to thank you guys for making time today. I know your time is valuable. That's a bad background I picked. It makes me look like a shadow. Not my background out there. I'm not sure what's going to appear when he does that, but let's see. Yeah, use that one. That looks better. Okay. So I want to introduce today a couple of very important people to me and probably a couple of very important people to you, because these guys have really pushed the product and really made it somewhat what it is today by really being innovative and being on top of us to make sure it works the way it needs to work, and really participating and not being mean if something breaks, and really giving us the opportunity to fix it. So the two people on the panel today are really my favorites from the perspective of just easy to work with, great to work with, very innovative, and I can't wait for them to share with you the different things and the different ways they've been using DoForms. So with that said, I want to introduce Elizabeth. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello to our friends and customers out there.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon.
Very good. And Dr. Ozadi.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm looking forward to kind of chatting with you about what we've been able to do with DoForms.
Very good. And Dr. Ozadi is with the Visiting Nurse Association of New Jersey, and Elizabeth, you can tell from her background, is with Clancy Movers. And I picked these people specifically because they kind of represent two different types of users. Where Dr. Ozadi is the head of innovation, and everything he does is about how can I improve how our caregivers provide service and how our company provides service, and can we identify products that really will make a difference in the service level that we provide. And it's really been a pleasure. I've even been asked to be on the board of advisors for the VNA, so I have a lot of insight as to the different things Dr. Ozadi is accomplishing throughout time, and it's great to hear how many different ways they've used DoForms, and I'll let him share some of that stuff. And Elizabeth to me is just sort of that corporate warrior who said, you know what, I'm going to solve problems for my company, and I'm going to find technology to do that. And she's just impressing the hell out of her company every day, and becomes very important to our company because she's solving problems. She's using technology to make her company a better company, to provide a better service to her customers. And that's really what it's all about, is how do we help the people who understand the problem to come up with the solutions that really will solve the problem, because we may be able to provide the technology, but we don't understand the problem the way these guys understand the problems they're trying to solve for people. So Dr. Ozadi, why don't you give a little bit of background kind of on how we started together. I remember that first day I came in, and we didn't even do what I first came in to do, right? You just said, I think you liked the product, and you said, I'm going to find a way to use this, right?
Yeah, that's very true. So I can just a little bit of background on myself and the organization that kind of put into context what we're doing with DoForms. So VNA Health Group, which is based in New Jersey for the most part, is home health and hospice. We also have a visiting physician practice where we go see the patient in the home instead of them going to see the doctor. The other piece of what we do is run community health centers throughout New Jersey. We also have home care hospice in Ohio, and we have a home health agency in Florida. So, we're spread out in a number of different places. So we're basically in the care delivery. That's our main business, but I've had the luxury probably for about the last 6 years of chairing something that we call the Connected Health Institute, and John is on our advisory board. And what we've been doing over the past several years is looking to see, is there technology out there that we can implement that improves the way we deliver care, also makes the work easier for our staff. And John and I we met in kind of a different way, in a sense of, I was looking for a solution to do mobile printing. And I had been talking to Brother, and they said, you should meet John and understand what DoForms can do, because they think it can solve a problem. And when I started to really figure out what DoForms could do, it was much more about the capability to do some mobile printing. It was really a tool that we could use to capture data. We've also designed a scheduling tool for our clinicians in the field. And then it became something extremely valuable when we got hit with COVID. And I can go into a lot of detail there, but you know, in a year ago, we were put in the position of figuring out how do we screen over 1,500 employees a day to determine who could go out and do a visit in a patient's home. And I basically picked up the phone and called John and I said, you know, we've done a lot with this application. What could we do more? Lauren stepped in and, you know, we were able to design something we still use today that I don't know if any other vendor could have been available and been so quick and helped us in a way to get us off the ground. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think you got me that night on an email. I got to Lauren that same night, and by morning, you two guys designed a system, and by the afternoon, you were like deploying it. So I think
Yes.
that's pretty interesting, and you know, it's been great working with you, and I can't wait to see all the different ways we're going to use this, and you know, and it's exciting. I'm happy to be on that board, and I look forward to those meetings. Now, you know, Elizabeth, you've been using DoForms, and why don't you give us your story there? Oh, we can't hear you. Can we unmute her?
I'm trying. It doesn't look like she is muted.
You gotta love technology, right?
Oh, yeah.
We got you?
Now you can hear me, right?
All right,
Yeah.
you scared me there for a minute.
I usually have safety earbuds in because I work in a warehouse.
You would have had to tell your story through hand signals in another minute.
Is this I love you for DoForms? Is that it? Is that corny
Very
enough?
good, very good.
Okay. So certainly we've been using DoForms now at Clancy for a few years. It started off as we had a need for a really straightforward solution. We had a lot of drivers. We were growing one of our portable storage companies, Go Minis, because we cover all throughout New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. So we have a lot of mobile technicians, mobile people. And we were currently getting physical paperwork back to a warehouse and then having someone drive the paperwork somewhere else, where then they could collect it and organize it. And it was a very slow, cumbersome process. And with our growth plan, we needed something that we could do and scale. So it started off as one division of our company using DoForms. And then everyone was like, wow, that's really cool. You know, I saw how you were able to answer a customer's question really quickly because you just went to the paperwork and it was all indexable. It was searchable because it was in data. It was in a digital format. And we were able to resolve a customer's issue and concern within 15 minutes where normally it would take us days. So right there, that kind of won some people over. And they said, well, can we do it for our commercial divisions? So we started exploring and doing more and more with it. And that's basically been the theme, is getting more done with DoForms, improving our ability to do data collection, reduce the errors that we're doing, and also meet our customers' changing demands, because our customers like to say that they're VIP, they want the VIP treatment, they want specific reporting done for them, they want specific things done on their forms, and we can do that with DoForms. So far I haven't run into anything where someone said, oh, I want this. We can do it. Okay, you know. So then I have been, as John mentioned, a bit of a hero in my company, because then I'm implementing things that we didn't know were possible or we didn't think were possible, and we're doing it very quickly. So there's also the speed at which we can do it.
And Elizabeth, you could even talk about the fact that we actually met, not for good news, but for bad news. You broke something, or we had a bug in DoForms and you caught it, you know, and you were able to contact us. And I think it's important for people to understand, you know, things aren't going to always go perfectly. There's no technology out there that never has a bug in it or never has an issue. But, you know, as somebody once said to me, it's not the fact that you have bugs, it's the fact on how you handle them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think me and you actually became friends by virtue of that one incident where you had that issue and we were able to jump on it for you, and I made it a priority. And,
Yes.
you know, so I think it's important for people to understand, you know, we're there for you. We're all about support.
Definitely speak to that because John, I remember when support ran into that point where they couldn't get any further and there was an enhancement request, but they could tell it was very important to our business and what we were trying to achieve and also how it was affecting our users. They escalated it to you and then you were calling me back. And I remember being surprised and actually like, wow, okay. And I feel pretty special here too, because I've worked in the computer software industry for a good 15 years now, which is kind of weird to even think about. But I worked with companies like SAP and Business Objects. Before that, it was Crystal Reports. And then I've worked with Front Range Solutions, and they have a lot of different technology. And several different software companies, you pay these fees and you don't get that kind of support unless you're really, really big. And we were just kind of growing. So I really felt good about that. And also how quickly you guys were able to make the changes that we were looking for.
And that's
It's
important
just,
because
we
care. We care about our customers. We understand we're helping run your business. Like I think, if we took DoForms away from you right now, or we'll introduce, Jeff in a moment. If we took DoForms away from you, you'd be like, what do I do now? Like it's running critical parts of your business.
That's
so
right.
We know that we need to be there for you. We don't want to be hidden behind a website. We don't want to be hidden behind a support phone number. The one thing I think you guys all know is one, you have the bat phone number, right? You can call me at any time of the night, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is you're always going to get a real person, and you probably have 2 or 3 people you work with in and out at DoForms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even that you only have one contact and God forbid that person's not available. We try to make it that you guys have multiple contact opportunities. And with that said, I'm glad to see that Jeff was able to join us here. And we should give Jeff a round of applause because a lot of the features that you have in DoForms have been paid for by my friend Jeff, who's impatient and says, I will pay for it because I want it right now.
Right.
So basically, Jeff has added a tremendous amount of functionality. And because, I kind of talked about the profiles, Jeff is definitely coming more from that IT, background. And the things that he's asked for are more of the, hey, I could do this if I programmed it. I should be able to do it in DoForms. And he's really kind of pushed the envelope to say, I need this to be more consistent with the things I could do on my own if I wanted to do those things. And, we've gone back and forth on a lot of things. And, one time he asked me, like, I want to be able to do, and I called it an inner join, because we were using technology terms. And I was like, wait, if we said automatically use first record found, we can accomplish that, and we'll automatically do this. And 2 seconds later, we had this complex data structure function as a simple thing that any user could do now, so not only has, Jeff participated in funding a lot of the DoForms features, he's participated in designing a great number of them. And I really do appreciate that. With that, Jeff, why don't you give us a little bit of background on you?
Yeah, so we here at Meade, we are a construction company, and we do 2,000 plus jobs a year. And so our challenge here in IT is how to develop forms that can be used on different types of jobs. So instead of having one form for every job, if you will, that would be 2,000 or 3,000 forms a year. What we've done is we've been able to create a form that's very flexible, that through the lookup data feature, that is able to basically make the form dynamic. So for example, we have forms that will collect information for labor, material equipment, unit type jobs, delays, impacts. And we've created a form that, based on how you set that form up through a simple Excel file, the form will actually turn on and off sections of that form to allow the PMs and our managers to create the form, if you will, custom for every single job. But instead of creating that form every time, we've actually programmatically created the form to be dynamic through just changing simple Excel files and uploading them. So John's been a great help with getting some features in place that allows us to use the forms consistently, but reuse the same form over and over for many different types of jobs.
Yeah, and I could honestly say Jeff's really pushed the envelope on what you can do with DoForms. And Jeff, I wanted you on the panel because you bring an interesting perspective, and I think a lot of IT people would look at DoForms and go, that's not a real development language. I'm not going to use that. I got to use C# or whatever the current thing is, and I'm going to use some kind of structure to manage the project and all of this kind of stuff. And, I think at the end of the day, what you've discovered is sort of like, it's the performance part of DoForms where you can do things quickly that allow you to be responsive. And it's that responsiveness that's allowing you maybe even to win some of the projects you're winning, right? Like,
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, there's really there's really nothing that I can say that we've not been able to do with a DoForm. Not only do we have our standard forms we use throughout the organization, but we can take a customer's form and their needs or requirements, and we can make that a DoForm and provide the customer with that information that they want in a very quick, timely process. The other thing that's great about DoForms is if we were to go out and write mobile apps to make this all work, we'd have to worry about Android updates, Apple updates, all sorts of tablet OS type updates that we don't have to really worry about with DoForms. DoForms makes sure that that application is compatible against many operating systems, many phones, many tablets, many types of Android systems. And it just takes all of that out of the game. So we concentrate on the requirements that we need and delivering a product that works, and consistently making that form reusable, which is huge for us here at Meade. We've got $2,000-3,000 jobs a year, and we are able to isolate those jobs down to 5 forms that are dynamically set up based on how you configure the form. So it's been, it's really, where would we be today without DoForms? We would find some other solution, but I've looked all over, and there's without a doubt, DoForms offers you the most flexibility for their product than any other product out there.
Yeah, I remembered you in the past saying, my company keeps trying to find like an all-encompassing solution that has mobile forms as part of it, but they never have good enough mobile forms to replace what you
Right.
guys were able to do.
That's right. One thing that you do best, there's no question, is that you're able to deliver forms across many different types of platforms. And we're not just talking about mobile devices here. DoForms you can use on a computer, and you can submit the same form. You can email a link to somebody, they can pull it up and submit a form. So the versatility of how you can actually capture data with DoForms is really unmarked. I have not been able to find that anyplace else.
And Dr. Ozadi, I think, one of the things that you kind of represent from our exposure with you has been sort of, you have the existing system in place, right? That does the majority of, your Medicaid billing and the heavy lifting and all that stuff. But, you're kind of finding that a lot of these systems don't address 100% of the requirement. And a lot of times, even if you go back to those companies and say, but I need to be able to print, or I need to be able to schedule, if that's not the priority of the moment for them, then they don't really answer you, right? Like they're so big and you're not a priority in some cases. And I think that's kind of what got us together, is you needed printing and you couldn't get them to give you printing, right? And we kind of, and that's frustrating. So the point I'm trying to make there too is, even though some companies may have a lot of infrastructure already, DoForms is sort of happy to also live in that last 20% that you weren't able to automate with your existing products. Could you speak to that a little bit, Dr. Ozadi?
Yes. So, we do work with a lot of large vendors who, for example, provide our medical record system. But the challenge is that when we ask for features that they don't see as necessarily priorities, it's much harder to get them to integrate that kind of functionality. So the example about the printing for us was, we have to give patients consent forms. We often get them to sign on a tablet, but there's no easy way then for us to get that consent back to them without our nurse going to the office and picking it up and going back out to the patient. So, the capability that we had in DoForms was we can create that same consent form. We could print it in the home, and we could also email it to family members right from the application. And we had been asking for this functionality from the EMR company for years and still have not gotten it. And I think this is where the flexibility of what DoForms allows us to do is incredible. And I also would point out that what we're doing in DoForms does not exist in isolation either. John's team has been able to work with the EMR vendor and actually get data from them in a secure way, so that some of our forms can actually be pre-populated with information on the patient that's coming from that electronic medical record. So again, this is another flexibility that he was able to offer us that I think is just amazing. I want to also point out that a lot of times too, when we looked at products to do some of what we do in DoForms, there's a rigidity in terms of how that vendor wants to sell you that product and what they want to build for you. So we have looked at things sometimes and said, oh, great, it's got 80% of what we need. But then when you start asking for that additional 20%, the costs escalate. They start saying, okay, well, these are all going to be modifications of the system and so on. It's not like that in DoForms because it is pretty much a blank slate for us to do what we need.
So Elizabeth, you build a lot of the forms, right, for your company? You're the form builder?
Yes, actually, and I was going to say, I started off with the templates that came with DoForms. So I don't know if you remember when I was doing the trials, I was comparing to several other solutions. This was a few years ago, but not that long ago, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I started with the templates, which were great because they gave me a lot of ideas for how everything would work together. And then I started off with an existing paper form, and I had to make the form in DoForms as much like the paper form as possible so that it would help our users adapt to the new technology. Because we had people that they called in our office like the test patients, the people that were going to have a really hard time with anything technology. Like they were still learning phones, like they were still just not really, these are old guys, older fellas that, they drive trucks, they load trucks. They're not necessarily the most, quick to adapt to something new, like, oh, a mobile form. Oh yeah, I want to use that. No, they're like, oh, what is that? But it looks exactly like what they were using. So we rolled it out to them and they were like, oh, well, it looks just like my form. And I'm like, yes, it is. You just put it in there instead of on the paper. And they're like, oh, I know how that works. So they felt really good and comfortable using it, which was a win. And then once the data started coming back on a monthly report, that monthly report that we scheduled to be automatically rolling up all those forms, because we do a lot of deliveries for libraries in the area of books and things like that. And, we would send the truck out, he would make several stops, log it in the DoForm, and then as soon as he hit submit, it would come back to the office, we'd have a record, and then all of that would roll up into a monthly report for billing. It saved hours and hours for the billing department. And then I just kept going with more templates to get started. So yes, I make the forms here, but I'm also basing it on what our existing forms look like and making them look as much like it as possible. And then once everyone got comfortable with it, they were able to let go of the idea of how to look like paper. At that point, they were like, well, we love this because we can have conditional logic that allows us to send out an entire basically stack of forms to the drivers with the drivers on their routes, but it's conditional. So if they choose an option, then they see an additional section to take a photo of the proof of delivery or a photo of the damages. If they see something like they're about to pick up something and they see a damage, take a photo, it prompts them to do it. And it's intuitive enough for them to go, okay, I just take a photo, point at it. And then we have an image, again, the paperwork coming back to us immediately, showing us what's going on. We're able to do something about it much faster and ultimately make the customers happier, which is what we're all, trying to do. That's how we're growing, we're scaling all of our divisions and adding locations. And during all of this when COVID, happened to us last year as an essential business too, like everybody else right here, we had to just keep going. And we weren't hung up in a lot of the areas in our functions that everything that was using DoForms was like, all right, we're going to go mobile now. We're all going to go remote. It was pretty seamless. Everyone was like, all right, we're good. It was the sections of our operations that were still using paper that got a little slowed down. So that really also shone a light on the fact that we want to do more with DoForms. Right?
Good. Hey, Jeff, a lot of people sometimes will say they'll compare us to like other products, like, oh, this other product, you can create a form in 3 seconds. Yours seems complicated. And I kind of go back and I say complicated is when you want to do something and you can't, right? Like that's frustrating, So when you look at the DoForms, as a product, as a feature set, we've been trying to give you a lot of features to be able to do data manipulation. All that layout stuff allows you to lay out, like Elizabeth said, I wanted to make the form look just like the form we were currently using. So yeah, that's going to make the product slightly more complicated than a, hey, drag a text box on and drag a numeric and say, hey, make me a form. Are you seeing that there's enough features now in DoForms? Like, have we gotten over that hurdle where, the feature set is there? I know you'll come up with another 1,000 things for me to build.
Right. That's true. Well, I can tell you that there's two ways to basically to create an end product, if you will, that type of form and how it looks with DoForms. One is you can use the built-in PDF feature set that basically, as you lay out the form, you can design the form with certain tables and grids. So you can actually, the form will look, when you collect the form on the tablet or on the phone, it will look like a piece of paper. And what we've done with Meade in our forms is that we have actually gone away from that, where we collect the data now that's easy for the user on the tablet in a manner for them to collect it. So we don't really look at the form anymore. We look at a form as data. How can we effectively create a DoForm to collect data, and then we can make the output of that form be anything we want by using what they call custom reports or custom templates. And we take these templates that are simply spreadsheets that you create, and then you basically add fields to the spreadsheet that are corresponding to the fields on the form. And you can collect data in one way that's real easy on the tablet for the user. And then you can make it look like any form you want. It can mimic, there's really nothing that you can't mimic in a spreadsheet or an Excel spreadsheet that looks exactly like a form. And so that's kind of how we've transformed it here. We've gone away from, hey, we have to make this form look like the user sees paper. We don't do that anymore. We basically say, how's the easiest way to collect the data from the user? And then how do you deliver it to the customer or to a requirement? How do you make that form look as an output? Whether that is, and it's most often a PDF that we're sending somebody, but we use custom report templates for, I would say, 95% of all of our forms. And it has worked really well, because just think about it. You have a customer come and says, hey, we like all the data, you're getting the information, but we need the form to look different. Well, you don't have to change it all, the DoForm. You may basically change the report template. And then that report template creates a different output, and then that's emailed. You can sync it in-house, you can save, you can do whatever you want with it. So we've kind of transformed DoForms in the respect that we really collect data, one, and second is we make the output look however we want. And they're two separate processes, and it really works well for us.
That's important, because we've all gotten PDFs that we try to open up on our phone, and you're sitting there trying to stretch it and shrink it. And then there's a DocuSign embedded 4 pages down, but you're not really sure where it is. And you're trying to scroll. And if it's, if your form is over here and your DocuSign's over there, you can't find it. And, it's really become something where if it's not easy for the person to use, like Elizabeth said, they're not going to want to use it. They're going to be hesitant to use it. But if you can optimize how they work with it, and there's been a lot of thought put into, some people say our forms aren't as pretty, right? I want to have rounded corners. I'm like, well, we don't have rounded corners because everything fits in this box model, and it's all meant to have ratios, and it makes it easy for you to put 3 things next to each other, and it'll stretch and it'll shrink. Yeah, if we only had one question, then you can make rounded corners, you can make it blank, you can do whatever you want. So we've really tried to focus on that ability for you to, one, always have an optimal experience on whatever device they're using. But that also allows you to, I don't know, have you guys gotten outside of your organizations at all? Have you sent form links? Have any of you sent form links to customers and started to use those capabilities where you have no control over the device they're using?
I do have some new customer information forms that originally were forms on our website, but then when we migrated to a new website last year, Clancy built out new websites. What I did was I replaced it with a redirect to a DoForms link. So the hosted DoForms is now where people go to submit the information, but they go to a link on our website that redirects them to the DoForm. So that this way it's more seamless for them. The link that all of our salesmen were sending out for the last 15 years didn't change. Now it just redirects to a DoForm. And then when they hit submit, just like the old form used to. It sends an email to our billing department. And we were talking about designing the forms to look a certain way. On the mobile devices, they do look different now than when the paperwork comes in. The paperwork coming in meets a template that looks just like what our billing team is used to. But now they're used to trying to decipher handwritten notes. So for them, they're thrilled, not having to do that.
And our selection of just saying use Excel to build your template, it's like you could either sit there for 10 years and try to learn our template builder over again. What we're seeing is a lot of our competition have two products. They have a form builder, and then if you want to make nice looking output, they have an output builder. And then you're sitting there going, I got to build it twice. Where with DoForms, you can kind of build it once.
Right.
If you don't need to make any changes, this is good enough because you can make it look beautiful. And if you do, you don't have to really learn a whole new product. You're just using Excel for the last 10 years anyway, right? And you got all that feature set in it. So it would take us years to be able to build a template builder that gave you the same capabilities you had just using Excel and making that the template.
Yeah, here at Meade, we collect data in the field, and when it's submitted, it comes in-house and we review it. And then we actually transfer the form. We forward the form to our customer somewhere in the Chicagoland area or another state. And that customer then receives the form, they can review it, and then they can sign off on it, approve it, and submit it. We can do all that within minutes. Whereas, of course, in the old days, where you had paper, you had to shuffle it from the field, did it in-house, you had to meet the inspector in the field, you had to do whatever to get it signed off on. And today we can do that at just clicking buttons on a computer. And they can sign off on the form on a tablet, they can sign off on the website, they can sign it. So it's very, very flexible. With the output, we also have some forms that we have actually two different outputs for the same form. So one output will go to payroll. That's how we get our guys paid. The other output goes to billing. The other output goes to a customer. So we have forms that actually, when they are submitted, we send out 3 different types of output based on what the customer demand is, whatever that user wants. So incredible flexibility.
And I think, even when you talk about the current technology of sort of doing what you just described, it's like get Adobe Acrobat, create a PDF, add DocuSign to it. By the time you're done, you got $50, $60 a month to send a PDF to somebody with a DocuSign in it that's hard to use. And it's like, why do you need all these other systems? You were able to send them a secure document for signature, just built into the DoForms platform. You don't need all these other components in order to make it work for you.
Right.
And I think that's where people got to start to understand the real value is starting to happen, and that if you really take out, I don't need a GPS tracking system anymore, and I don't need a DocuSign anymore, and I don't need a PDF generator and a Crystal Reports and all these different things. It's basically there. Dr. Ozadi, we've worked really closely for a long time, and one of the most interesting things, and you touched on it before, was sort of the emergency response to COVID. And if you could talk just a little bit about how you guys were able to create a form, and the form kind of determines the status of the person and then what you kind of do. And you made a comment to me in an email. We've been using DoForms to keep our people safe. Right. So it wasn't even about data collection for you. It was about safety, employee safety.
Yeah. Well, and it was patient safety as well. So, when COVID started, as I alluded to before, we had to start screening staff, and, there were a core set of symptoms that we were looking at, as well as, whether our staff had been in contact with COVID positive patients, whether they had used appropriate PPE. So we had a daily screening, which still exists today, that depending on how those questions are answered, it actually triggers a report that our employee health staff would look at and then follow up directly with the employee and determine whether or not that individual could be in the field that day. And there were other forms built into this, but basically we would track that individual for the next 14 days until we knew we can take them off for quarantine. And then as testing became available, we had a tracking system for negative and positive tests so that we could align all this information. So again, what we were trying to do is keep people safe and make sure that no one went out and visited a patient and put them at risk. And also we were looking at how infections were occurring among our own staff by using some of these forms. And it was extremely valuable. The interesting thing was we were about 2 months into this, and I had companies who thought they were very creative and come up with systems that they thought were going to do the same thing. And they were far less flexible and useful than what we had already designed. So we never left the process we had. And this grew to be much bigger for our organization. And just to mention to you one other piece that has become another valuable component of how we've used DoForms. So we shifted into trying to get patients vaccinated. So I don't know if you've seen any of this, but the idea is, we serve a population of people who are homebound, and it's extremely difficult for them to get out, get vaccinated. Often they physically can't do it, or they don't even have family members who could get them to an appointment, and they're all eligible for vaccines. So what we did is we put in place a mechanism where people could be referred by our own staff for potential for home vaccination. So we built a whole referral system in DoForms. But then once people were selected, we would go out and we needed to do a screening of them. We needed to get a consent. And we also needed to get data on the vaccines that we were delivering so that we can supply that information to the New Jersey Department of Health. And again, this is where DoForms comes in with a great amount of flexibility, where our nurses in the home were recording all the necessary information that needed to be reported to the state. I looked at what the state needed, and they basically had the requirements for an Excel spreadsheet. So now at the end of each day, we have an automated report that comes out of DoForms that matches that Excel spreadsheet, and then we just send it to the state. So this is like incredible, fast, flexible, and we didn't pay any more than we typically do for DoForms to complete something for us that would have been very challenging to have done manually.
So I think I hear this theme, from all three of you, is that you're able now to kind of match problem to solution, where the answer isn't, okay, we have a problem, let's identify vendors, let's get vendor responses back, let's do a vendor learning, let's do a trial. If you had to do that, these problems would be over by the time you actually could solve them, right?
That's true.
So, in some respects, it sounds like it's really become something where it's a strategic way for you to solve problems immediately. It's like, I have a toolbox with me, let me open up the toolbox and take out my drill. And we've worked very hard, I guess, to really make it something that we want to have this sort of land and expand, in our customers. We don't want it to be the, hey, this solves your accounting problem, but if you have a sales problem, go find a sales tool. We want you to be able to say, hey, how can I use that for sales? How can I use that for installation? How can I use that for something else? And it seems like you guys are able to navigate through that. Jeff, you've probably got some of the largest projects. I mean, you talk about yourself as a construction company, but you're like doing like all. I flew into Chicago, and like there was Meade trucks across the whole highway changing all the light poles or something like.
Right. Well, you'll see us at O'Hare landing. We're doing a runway lighting project right now at O'Hare Airport. So you'll land and see us. So yeah, we're everywhere. We're in states all over the country, and the ability to collect data no matter where you are is just immense. It's the amount of labor that we save on just moving paper around is incredible, and what we found is, as issues and problems come up that we want to automate, we find that it's not a technology problem anymore. We really focus on, it's a process problem with our whole within our organization. How do we do it now is not translated to technology. We know we have a solution with DoForms that we can provide. What we really focus on more of the time is, how do we change the process that we do things in our organization? How do we change that process and then use the DoForm within it? Whereas when we first started using DoForms, of course, it was all about technology. How do you make the forms? How do you make them work? How do you get the output? Now it's just the opposite. It's more, You look at your process, how you do things, and then how can you make your process more efficient using the technology of a DoForm.
So we have like 4 minutes left. I'd like to ask maybe one question and each of you can kind of answer it, but do you see in your organization, like you're the champions of DoForms in your organization, and I know like other people take notice, right? Like Dr. Ozadi, do you see, like other departments starting to go, hey, what are those guys doing? Why are they able to like solve all these problems? And are they starting to ask, how can we use this too? Is that something you're seeing in the organization as you're more successful with it?
So I think, I started out as the champion for DoForms, but I don't need to champion it anymore. And I'll tell you, our CEO, Steve Landers, he often turns to me and said, can we do this in DoForms? So he's now recognized that there's this new tool out there that can get us someplace faster and easier. So I can certainly see opportunities going forward, but I think some of them are not even going to be my ideas anymore. They're really going to be within the company, people saying, well, this is a great opportunity to apply this tool in a way to solve a problem.
Yeah, I remember being in a couple of the board meetings where we talked about other products and I've heard people go, why can't we just do that with DoForms?
Right.
Elizabeth, do you see like other parts of your organization now kind of like jealous or looking at what you're doing and saying, why can't we do that? Or
Oh, absolutely. It started off, that's how it started off. It started off with one department that had a requirement for collection and a report. We mirrored what they were doing. We made the output, what they expected, and it just consistently delivered every single month. And they were like, all right, let's try it for another department. Let's try something else. And at first, I think they were more hesitant, but the way that the model set up with DoForms pricing too, it's very scalable. It's not so scary for our team to go, okay, we'll just add a few more users. We'll add a few more users as we grow and use it. So there's that. We also, like how DoForms plays well with others. And that has helped us spread DoForms throughout the company, because what happens is some of our forms pull a field from DoForms and it puts it into the subject line of the email that comes out with the PDF. And because it's in a particular bracket, when it gets sent via email to one of our other ticketing systems or order entry systems or management systems, it actually attaches directly to the order. So a lot of that manual paperwork collection, or even taking it from your email and attaching it to this other system, doesn't need to be done anymore. DoForms emails the system directly, it attaches, and then our team just started noticing, hey, why are these forms coming through like this? They look different than the forms. They're all typed into. What happened? I was like, well, these forms are generated by DoForms. How do we get more people doing it? Was the next question.
thank you. And Jeff, I know I even trained somebody else for you, and
Right.
I've had conversations with your CIO, and he's told me people want to expand. I guess you see some demands on your time. Sometimes it could actually be dangerous to be the DoForms expert, right?
Yeah, well, there's so much going on here. Really, it has not. We don't really sell DoForms anymore. What we actually have to do is manage the priority. Who takes priority first over development and focusing on changing the process. So DoForms sells itself, and so now we manage priorities, and there's really nothing that once we start on the path of developing with the DoForm, it's not a matter of can it be done, it's a matter of when can we do it, and what priority is it. So
yeah, and defining the requirements so that you've got it
right.
Well laid out. What was it going to be? What do we want to do? And I will also say that the forms so there's some forms I put in place years ago I haven't touched in years. And that's actually a really good thing that I haven't had to touch them. They just work. And then I can move on to the next thing, because DoForms is one of many tools in the toolbox here, and it does it really, really well. So it's now the benchmark of what forms should be whenever we're looking at anything for any other department. It's like, all right, well, what are the form capabilities? We ask the questions and we know what to expect. And if their tool doesn't have it, we're like, well, we're not going to use that. We're going to use DoForms instead. And then we use, some of the different functionality to just have them work seamlessly together.
Which is interesting, because there's probably been like 19 versions of iOS in the last, 3 years, and they keep changing the operating systems and doing all kinds of funky stuff. So the fact that it continues to work for you year after year, is actually pretty interesting, because you're not having to constantly deal with iOS 12 and iOS 13 and
Mhm.
Android this and Android that. You know, we
Mhm.
try really hard on our side to isolate you guys from those issues, right?
Mhm.
You should be focused on how do I solve problems, not, oh God, there's a new version of the operating system coming out.
Right.
So I just would want to, I mentioned to you, and this is kind of a funny story in some ways, because every form that we do, and they are typically different operational functionalities built into them, gets referred to as do forms, because people are so familiar with like one company doing a product in a certain way. They don't realize that in our case, we've probably got 20 different applications of do forms, but they all get referred to as do forms, like it's the Kleenex of the products, right? So I'm often trying to, when I get questions about a do forms problem, I'm like, well, which one of those forms are you using? So I don't know if that's a success of your product, but in many ways it just gets to see, it's seen as this generic entity.
So we want to become these Scott towels. As one.
That's right.
Well, with that said, I think we're out of time here. I want to thank you guys. I know you're all busy, and I know you all did this as a favor for me, and I appreciate it. And your time today, I hope everybody found it very valuable. I always enjoy speaking with you guys, and just want to thank you and really tell you, I think you all did a wonderful job here today, and you really, you know, we love you guys. So hopefully, you know, you feel that too. So
Well, thanks, John.
Feeling the love. Thank you.
Yes.
thank you guys.
All right. Bye.
All right. You want us to drop off now?
Yeah, he's gonna, you can drop
Okay.
off. He's gonna close it up.
All right. Thank you.